Hi there, once again. I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome to this next session of reading Sun Tzu's Art of War. Today, we're doing the chapter 11, which is the nine kinds of ground. Um, this is last chapter we talked about the kinds of terrain, right? Well, this is a more in detailed understanding of the kinds of grounds here. And he will talk about the nine. This is about type of the ground that you're dealing with, the battle space, or the six different types of space you're going to be dealing with as of this. Um, you will note that. Well, even though you will see this after I did it, this has been done the same day as I made my general history video that I promised people a long time ago. So it's going to be very interesting that people are going to see videos where I talk about not doing it, and then I've done it. You know what I've done it already. Again, this is why these are done pre-recordedly. Um, so today we're doing chapter 11, nine kinds of ground. Now, of course, he begins. This text always begins as we see top corner, right there, and you see, oh my God. Sun Tzu said. Now he introduces again the thing about Sun Tzu said. Uh, um, he goes, now in war there are nine kinds of ground. Now he go list the nine kinds of ground. Scattering ground, light ground, and pay attention to the intent that there's a margin error on the print screen here. The scattering should be with the rest of that. The stanza starts with in war there's nine kinds general, then there's a space, and then scattering ground one, light ground two, three strategic ground, four open ground, five crossroad ground, six heavy ground, seven intractable ground, eight enclosed ground, nine death ground. I already talked about this earlier hits on things he talked about before about different types of terrain. Right? He talked about the uh, uh, enclosed terrain. No, he talked about four terrains earlier. He goes entangled terrain. You talk about entangled. Um, in other words, there's forms of terrain, and there he had six of it. Right. This is on forms of terrain. Previous two, yeah, a previous chapter. We talked the day before this. Um, Accessible terrain, entangled terrain, deadlocked terrain, enclosed terrain, precipitous terrain, and distant terrain. Right. So he gives us six terrains, but now kind of grounds, he gives us nine, and enclosed is enclosed is second is number eight, which is number third. Um, is there anyone entangling? No, nothing else. I think yeah. The only one that's similar to it is deadlock. Deadlock. I mean, yeah, deadlock. Deadlock. Enclosed. Sorry, enclosed. Enclosed. Sorry, not deadlock. Deadlock is not there. Um, So therefore, there's only one in between this thing that's similar, that enclosed ground. And he was not so clear about enclosed ground, if I remember correctly. Enclosed ground earlier was not really um, enclosed. He says if it talks about if it occupied it first, we must block it and wait for the enemy. If he occupies it first and blocks it, do not go after him. But if he does not block it, then go after him. So therefore, but what it is not talked about. Um, so let's look at this. When the feudal lords fight on home ground, that is scattering ground. In other words, things can scatter. Scattering ground is like when feudal lords uh, fight on home territory. This is scattering ground. So in the battles that soldiers are fighting on their home ground, they'll scatter and you go back and they might merge again. You never know. Um, when an army enters an enemy territory, but not deeply, that is light ground. So he's talking about if okay, first is you're in your own area. This is scattering ground. In other words, an army of when feudal lords fight On their home territory, that's scattering ground. What is light ground? It means that you have. This is an army has got into your territory, but a little bit. In other words, not deeply. The enemy is an army enters enemy territory, but not deeply. This is light ground. When the ground offers advantage to either side. In other words, either side, but I think this is one side or another, right? Is strategic ground. In other words, not alliances in that sense. The crossroad that was, I think that was the one before, right? Yeah, no, the deadlock. No, it took. It's not a case of crossroads or things going like this. Rather, it's when it offers an advantage to either side. In other words, and therefore this is strategic. When each side can come and go freely, that's open ground. So open means they can, all sides can come and go. When a ground borders three states, and the first to his mastery has mastery over the empire. In other words, a state that you grab and three states, and you want your master, you can have control of the empire, right? A mastery of the empire. That is crossroad grounds. So crossroad is that a place where it borders three. Once you capture it, it secures control of the empire. When the army enters when the army enters enemy territory deeply, sorry, I have to move it. That's the borders of when the borders three states and at first take his mastery. That off crossroad ground, right? Now he says here, and then like I said, we'll just go back for a second. When the ground borders three states, the corner down here, right? Um, um, and the first to take it has mastery over of the empire. That's crossroads. So you a position that you get it dominates the whole thing, and you control the rest. When army enters enemy territories, when army enters enemy territory deeply and holds several fortified towns in its rear, that is heavy ground. So not only do you, I mean, if you just get in, that's light ground. But when you get deep in it and then hold and take some towns and fortify that's secure or fortified, that's heavy ground. When an army travels through mountains and forests, cliffs and hags, marshes and fens, hard roads, these are intractable grounds. Okay, well that's interesting. And intractable is that what? These are difficult places marching through mountains, forests. Remember what he said about forests. Be careful because forest spies are going to be there. Mountains and things. You should always you talk about this other things, but different terrain, different thing. Marshes and fens, but marching. We talk about marching. Hard roads. These are intractable ground. Okay, so therefore like this, and then ground reached through narrow gaps and through narrow gorges, retreated from by twisting paths, where a smaller force of theirs can strike a larger one. That is enclosed ground. In other words, this is what's enclosed ground is this thing that where you have to go through narrow gaps or narrow gorges, or you have to retreat. You have to go through twisting paths. This when a smaller force of theirs can strike our larger one because of this geographic situation. This is enclosed ground. Okay, that's why he says if it's not blocked, go after them, right? Because in other words, the attacking force has the advantage if it's not blocked, and where a smaller force can overpower a larger force, apparently in that sense. Um, where ground where survival requires a desperate struggle, where without a desperate struggle we perish. That is death ground. So death ground is what we requires any ground or position that requires a drastic struggle, where without a desperate struggle we perish. This is death ground. Okay? He goes, in scattering ground, do not fight. In light ground, do not halt. In other words, you're making once you get this foothold, keep on going. On strategic ground, do not attack. In other words, it doesn't make any sense. If a strategic ground again is what one that favors it gives all the sides get advantage. There's no advantage for one side over the other. So again, don't attack on strategic ground. In open ground, do not block. Remember what open ground is. Open ground is um, um, that you can come that you can come and go freely. So do not block. Do not let them escape, or let them come in. Let them go out. Do not block. Um, on crossroad grounds, form alliances. On heavy grounds, plunder. You have your forts, your horde, they plunder. Now this is where my talk I mentioned something about this. This is where we would that maybe modern warfare would disagree with him, because if you're holding those forts and those things, um, if you plunder and make yourself hated by the surrounding peoples, well, you'd rather you'd maybe not plundering and bring your own stuff. You make them make and that therefore maybe they that's the thing. This is a debate that modern warfare people would argue against Sun Tzu here. But the idea is you can use the enemy resources. What if in other words, if you're not if, don't plunder from their military bases and their things like that, so that you can use their resources or utilize their facilities. Once you take your cities and fortify them, use those things to kind of do this. That's that. So plunder, take advantage of the local resources. On intractable ground, keep marching. In other words, don't stay on intractable ground. March, keep on marching. On enclosed ground, devise stratagems. Make strategies to show you get the advantage. Blocking things. On death ground, you fight or you die. Skillful warriors of old could prevent the enemy vanguard from lurking with his rear, from linking with his rear. Large and small divisions from working together. In other words, so therefore the enemy, in other words, can prevent the enemy's vanguard from linking with its rear. In other words, you can cut off the vanguard from the rear force, prevent the enemy from linking with those two forces. Large and small divisions from working together. In other words, a large division and small units working together. Crack troops from helping poor troops. Officers and men from supporting each other. The enemy, once separated, cannot reassemble. Once united, could not act in concert. Okay, so therefore, this is the skillful warrior of old could do what? He could prevent the vanguard from linking with its rear. Okay, that's the vanguard is your front force, and the rear is the forces behind it. Usually, where supply is and your reinforcements. If you cut off the link between them, they can't act effectively. Prevent large divisions from working with small divisions. Crack troops to work with helping poor troops. Prevent them from cooperating, and officers and men from supporting one another. Put divisions between the officers and men. Um, from the enemy, once separated, cannot reassemble. But even when they're united, they're not acting. They don't know how to act concertly. When there was some gain to be had, he made a move. The skillful warrior. When there was none, he halted. So therefore, if there was some gain that he to be had, you move. You have to move again. Now, remember, be warned about some game. Remember, some game. If you don't, if things are not going, you can make a move for some gain, but if it's all of a sudden there's resistance and you're going to take everything in it, no, you don't. So it's not an absolute statement here. To the question, how should we confront numerous and well-arrayed and well-arrayed who are poised to attack? Okay, and the answer is my reply: see something he cherishes, and he will do your will. In other words, he has numerous forces and they're ready to attack. And they're going to attack you. What do? You siege something, you seize something, you grab something that the enemy in their leadership values a lot, and he will do your will. Not a hostage. I don't think this is about the hostage taking or something like that. And this is about grabbing something, a strategic, something that is very strategic for their side, and they have to do something. Grab something or make a move towards something that they have to defend, and they will they will go, they will move the way you want them to move. Speed um, is the essence of war. Exploit the enemy's unpreparedness, attack him unawares, take unexpected routes. In other words, speed in warfare is very much the issue. And in other words, it's a sense, the essence. It is the essence of war. In other words, don't wait wars, battles that like for longer. Your resources, time is money. Or you say time is resource, time is food. Exploit enemies' unpreparedness. So therefore, areas you attack when they're unprepared or not ready for you. Attack him unaware. In other words, places where he's not aware of things. Take unexpected routes. So don't take the route that he expects you to take. Take routes that 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 he's not prepared for you to take. Pardon me. It's the air. I have to turn the fan on. The way of invasion is this: deep penetration brings cohesion. Your enemy will not prevail. So you go deep penetrations, right? Allows you to cohese your force. Your enemy will not be able to prevail you. Plunder fertile country to nourish your men. Cherish your troops. Do not wear them out. Nourish your energy by concentrating it. Okay? Move your men about. Devise stratagems that cannot be fathomed. Throw your men where there's no escape, and they will die rather than flee. These men who have faced death can achieve anything. They will give their last drop of strength to officers and men alike. So he's saying, what this is kind of counterintuitive. Like you would say, in many sense, he said, pick things that you'd win, not always do the hammer, the big giant millstone to the egg, right? But he's also saying this: devise stratagem that cannot be found by the enemy. In other words, can't figure it out, can't do things like this. But throw your men where there's no escape, and they will die rather than flee. There's no escape. They have to die, right? And men who have faced death can achieve anything. They will give their last drops of strength, officers and men alike. So troops in desperate straits know no fear, where there's no escape. They stand firm when they have entered have entered deep. They persist where they see no hope. They persist when they see no hope. They fight. In other words, when they have entered deep, they persist. In other words, so you get deep in the enemy territories, you get things, and there's no retreat. They will fight. They are alert without needing discipline. In other words, this is the condition. If the troops are in that situation where they have no way out, they are alert without needing discipline. They will act without needing instruction. They are devoted without needing a compact. They are loyal without needing orders. So this is a very strange moment that you're sending troops in a situation where they cannot retreat. And what happens is, in many ways, when they're, in other words, you don't need. What is it? It's a very interesting point he's making here about um, uh, they are alert without discipline. They act without needing instruction. They are devoted without needing a compact agreement. And they are loyal without orders. That is, the opposite of what you have to do normally, right? So that the situation where they can't retreat, You enter really deep in the enemy territory. Your forces are very concentrated, and then what? Well, there's no easy way out for them to come back. Okay, if the enemy cuts, particularly if the enemy immediately comes towards you, right? They'll surround you. Um, he's next thing he says: forbid consulting the omens. Cast out doubts, and they will go to the death. In other words, don't let no omens coming. Don't let the omens. Just cast out doubt. No doubt. Don't allow doubt to enter here, and they will go on to death. Our men have no excess of worldly goods. They have no excess of worldly goods. Yet they do not disdain wealth. They do not expect to live long, yet they do not disdain long life. So therefore, you're saying something. Most of the men don't have no excessive wealth. They're not wealthy. They don't hate wealth. Yet they don't expect to live long, but they don't want to die either. Right? On this day, they are ordered into battle. They sit up and weep, wetting their clothes with their tears. They lay down and weep, wetting their cheeks. In other words, on the on the day they are the batter, they'll cry and then, but throw them where there's no. In other words, troops in a normal battle will whine and moan and things, but if you throw them where there's no escape, he says they will fight with the courages of heroes of Ji, Zu, and Yi. There's the heroes of these heroes. They'll be Superman, Achilles, and these things. They were like, you throw them in a no place with no hope, they will act like superheroes. The heroes. The skillful warrior deploys his troop like the Sharash, the Sharashan snake. That's a snake that it's a type of snake found in the mountains of Han. Strike its heads, strike its head, and the tail lashes back. Strike its tail, the head. Strike the belly, the head, and the tail strikes. Uh, um, you will, in other words, you think about the nature of attack. If you attack one thing, the other side has the tail attack. If the strikes the tail, the head attacks. If you strike the belly, then the head and the tail strikes the back. Um, so what is the next point he says? This is interesting. Um, oh yeah, and it continues. His head and tail will attack you. Right? To the question, can an army be like a Sharon snake? I reply, yes, it can. Take the men of Wu and the men of Wu, Wu and Lu. They're enemies. But if they cross a river in the same boat and they encounter the wind, they will help each other, right hand and left. He's saying what? Even people who are not necessarily like, this is the thing. This is an interesting argument. That there's two. You take people who don't like each other, but then what do? You put them in a contest of survival. They will become. They will act as one. Okay. In other words, you put them in a situation where normally they would be disunited and be disciplined. This is very interesting in that sense. The psychology he's doing here. In a normal situation, in a normal battlefield, if it's not dire, you need to do all the things he said you don't need to do. You need to what? You need to basically um, make sure your troops you have to what? You have to make sure they stand firm. You have to what? You need to give them discipline, instructions. You have to make sure that there's a sense of loyalty amongst them, and that they understand why you're doing what they're doing. Okay, the way, remember, the compact, the way. Uh, so, but in that dire situation, those things aren't needed. He's saying here, and therefore this thing, and therefore this is a very strong moment. So the army that is in a situation where he's way in the out there, stuck out here. There's no hope of retreating. He's no way out. And therefore that is how it's going to be the Szechuan sake, because why it will be the situation will force a unity and a degree of fighting or dying that will keep them in a state of preparedness, cooperation, agreement. That's saying here. It is not enough to tether horses and to buy to bury chariot wheels. In other words, you just can't simply. It's not going to be enough to merely tether horses and bury the wheel. You have to put them in a situation where they're really, there's no way out. There must be a single courage throughout. This is the way to manage an army. It must have single courage throughout. In other words, there must be a single courage. In other words, one courage to go, and therefore this is the way to manage it. This is why this idea of the stratagem to put them in a situation where they have no choice. Strong and weak can both serve, thanks to the principle of ground. So, understanding the principle of ground, which is understand the ground things here, both strong and weak can operate. The skillful warrior directs his army as if it were a single man. He leaves it no choice but to obey. So the skillful warrior treats his army as though it's one man, and it gives it no situation to disobey. And it is the business of the general to be still and inscrutable, to be upright and impartial. So the role of the general is to be still and unreadable. Why? Here, this is the big argument. This is why some people don't understand this. Uh, this is about not signaling. You're not being not you have to be calm inside. You can't signal to the opponent your doubts or anything, because everything you signal something, this may give him this is information that he can use, and then how he can do something. You need to be inscrutable, unreadable, and not only to you but to your men, because this is a double way. Okay, you must be upright and impartial. In other words, again, this is for your these two things are more for the trust of your soldiers. If you're seen as impartial, then what? But that's going to be good. If your enemy knows, first of all, if you're not upright and you're not impartial, this is going to cause problems with your troops. If the enemy knows that there's problems with the troops, that's an advantage for him. That's a weakness. He must be able to keep his own troops in ignorance, to deceive their eyes and their ears. In other words, you have to people. He has to deceive his troops in one sense. To what? This is a very interesting comment here. He says what? He needs to be able to keep his own troops in ignorance. In other words, to deceive their eyes and their ears. He changes his ways and alters his plan to keep the enemy in ignorance. Okay, that's another reason why maybe he needs to keep the soldiers not. You need to prevent the soldiers from seeing you be too changeable. You need to be in other words, this is why you need to be inscrutable to your own soldiers, so that you can what signal wrong information to the enemy. He changes his plans and alters the plan to keep the enemy in ignorance. He shifts camp and makes roundabout routes to keep the enemy in the dark. So what is he doing? In other words, he's doing things like this in order to keep the enemy in from. He changes his plans and alters his changes his ways. If he's done if he does a certain thing a certain way, he should not make sure he does do it again, or change the pattern so that the enemy can't rely on a pattern of your behavior that they can predict what you're going to do. You can't be careful, because once you get in a certain way of doing something and it becomes a pattern, unthought of pattern, then the enemy the enemy catches that pattern. They can use that. That's a weakness now that they can take advantage of, and you need to be on the watch out for that. And again, he shifts his camp about to keep the enemy in the dark, and he shifts the camp where the camp he's operating from. And it takes a roundabout routes. Why? To keep the enemy in the dark. Not sure, lacking the information, and therefore what? Not knowing where to prepare against you. So you can strike. Therefore, this allows you to strike at their places where they're not prepared. Then comes the big. This becomes another big. This like the skillful lawyers with the snake. That was a long stanza. This is another long stanza here. Not as long, but he says right there. He leads his men in battle like a man climbing a height, and kicking away the ladder, he leads them into the deep into the territory of the feudal lords. And he releases the trigger. He burns his boat. He breaks his pot, sees it like a shepherd, driving his sheep this way and that. No one knows where he's going. In other words, this is a very interesting symbol. In other words, and this is the image of Cortez when he gets to the New World, burning the boats, no way back, shattering his pots, breaking his pots. Uh, the pots are what the supply, and in other words, he released the trigger. In other words, he's in their enemies' feudal lord, the territory of their feudal lords. He's in right. He goes deep into their territory. He kicks away the ladder. He leads them deep into the territory of the feudal lords' enemies, back territory. And then what does he do? Release the trigger by burning his boats and destroying the parts. And then, like a shepherd, he just drives his sheep this way and that, so no one knows where he's going. So he grabs certain things. He assembles his troops and throws them into danger. This is the business of the commander. He assembles his troops and throws them into danger. This is the thing. These things must be studied. The variations of the nine ground, the advantages of flexible maneuver, and the principles of human nature. So this is the three things he says. The variations of the nine ground. This type of thing. You have to know this. But the advantages of flexible maneuver. Again, that's the treasure on snake, right? Flexibility of maneuver and attacking this way and not that way. He talked about this elsewhere also. And the principles of human nature. This is a very point interesting. The way of invasion is this. So first of all, we talk about these are the things that must be three. These things must be studied, right? The variations of the nine kinds of ground, the advantages of flexible maneuver, and the principle of human nature. But now he talks about the way of invasion is this. Deep penetration brings cohesion. Shallow penetration brings scattering. So invasion. You have a shallow thing, it's going to be a scatter. If there is a deep presentation, a penetration, your forces will gather like this. When you leave your own territory and lead your men across the border, you enter dire terrain. So once you go in enemy territory, that's dire terrain. Dire terrain is not death terrain. It means it's dangerous. You can die, not that you will die in that sense. And when there are lines of communication of all four sides, and you are on crossroad terrain, when there are lines of communication on all four sides, and you're in crossroad terrain. Okay, you have lines of communications in all four directions. Well, that's crossroad terrain. And what he said there, don't. What does he do? You crossroad terrain. You don't do what? On crossroads, you go back over here. On crossroads, you form alliances, right? Then, when you penetrate deeply, you on heavy terrain, right? When you penetrate slightly, you light terrains again. And then, and these are strongholds. When there are strongholds to your rear and narrow passes in front, if there are strongholds to your rear and narrow passes in front, you are on enclosed terrain. So strongholds, enemy strongholds are there. Forces that you can't do it, and your front is through um, um, uh, uh, and narrow passes in the front. You're in closed terrain. When there's no way out, you're in deaf terrain. On scattering ground, we unite the will of our men. Interesting. You do not fight on scattering ground, right? But unite the will of the men. Hmm. On strategic ground, we bring up our rear. On open ground, we see our defenses. In other words, on open ground, what is open ground? You do not block, right? Yeah, on open ground, do not block. Crossroad from alliances. Um, on scattering ground, do not fight. But here in scattering ground, we unite. Don't fight, but we unite the will of our men. So they create better will. On light ground, we keep them connected. So we're on light ground. We need to keep our troops connected. We have to prevent them from scattering. Remember, he says earlier, what happens is a shallow presentation brings scattering. We have to keep our men, keep them connected. In strategic ground, we bring up our rear. On open ground, which again is do not block, and it's both sides can come and go. Right, we build our we see to our defenses. The enemy can come and go easy, so therefore on crossroad grounds, and you don't attack on that. Never, you don't attack on open ground. You do not block. Um, on crossroad grounds, you strengthen our alliances. On heavy ground, we ensure the continuity of supplies. On tractable ground, we keep on the move. In closed grounds, we block passes. On death ground, we demonstrate the desperateness of the situation. In other words, we make sure that this leader does, the desperateness of the situation. It is in the soldier's nature that when he's surrounded, he resists. When all seems lost, he struggles on. When in danger, he obeys orders. In other words, this is human nature. I mean, saying about something human nature. Um, without knowing the So therefore, when on heavy ground, we continuity of supplies. On tractable grounds, we keep on our move. In closed grounds, we block the passes. On death grounds, we demonstrate. Um, um, on death ground, we demonstrate. Okay, this is the problem. On death ground, should be blocked up here. This is another error. It should be underneath the closed grounds, spaced between enclosed grounds. Show this again, so you get a sense of why I'm reading this. Not I'm sorry. I should have a better edition. Um, on death ground, we demonstrate the situation of the situation. Then it's in the soldier nature that when he's surrounded, he resists. When all seems lost, he struggles on. When in danger, he obeys. Without knowing the plan of the feudal lords, you cannot form alliances. So therefore, this is what he says. You need to know what. Without knowing the plans of the feudal lords, the other lords, and the questions of this, and on strategic ground, you can't make alliances. You need to have the knowledge of what their plans are. If you don't have that, then how can you form alliances? So you need to get that information. Without knowing the lie of the hills, of woods, of cliffs and crags, in of marshes and fens, you don't know these things, but the lie of the situation. You cannot march. Without using local guides, you cannot exploit the lay of the land. So you're not learning the lay of land. You can't do this. You need to how you do that. Local guides. Uh, um, in other words, so therefore, without knowing land, you can't march, but you need to know that. Now, if you read Machiavelli, Machiavelli was saying, "Hey, a lot of territories are, if you know the territory of your place, you'll probably know the territory of the other place." Um, Sun Tzu suggests that there's not a continuity of territory. In other words, something, but there, even though there are certain types of territory, territory is too diverse, and that even slight differences might not be enough. You need local knowledge. There's this real emphasis on local knowledge in Sun Tzu at this point regarding here, which Machiavelli would say, okay, Machiavelli probably agree, but Machiavelli said that still there's going to be enough to know. If you know that the hills are the same, if the hill is enough similar to it of your hills you've experienced, you should know how to deal with this. Reasoning from analogy in that sense. Sun Tzu seems to be a little less willing to make that analysis. He wants to say that the hills and woods, crafts and crags, cliffs and crags, marshes and fens. If you don't know the lie of them, and that's very particular in that sense. These are very particular things. Where is the safe way to walk? How to do it? You need local knowledge. Without local guys, you can't exploit the land of the land, lay of the land. So you can move your troops down. Or you can know when if you know the knowledge of the thing, maybe they can't march to it. So you can use it as a mechanism to kind of lure things or to prevent things. Say this is ignorance of one of these points of everything that he's talked about up here so far. One of these points is not characteristic of the army of a great king. In other words, when an army of a great king attacks a powerful state, he does not allow his enemies to concentrate his forces. He over um, he overawes his enemy and undermines his alliances. So again, in other words, all these things you talked about here, ignorance of any one of these points is not characteristic of a great king, army of a great king. And then what does the army of the great king does? What? He attacks powerful states. He does not allow the enemy to concentrate his forces, and he overawes the enemy by undermining his alliances. He does not strive to ally himself with all the other states. He doesn't try to make alliances with all the other states. He does not foster their power. That's what he doesn't kind of encourage or build the power of other states. He pursues in his own secret designs, overawing his enemy. In other words, he basically chooses to do what? Instead of overemphasizing using other powers to do this, he says he uses what? He uses his own. Pardon. He uses his own strategy, his stratagems to what? Overawe the enemy, and uh, um, uh, you know, and take him. He Thus he captures the enemy cities, destroys the enemy state. So you take your thing and you go deep into their territory. You capture their cities. You capture their cities and you take away their state, destroy their state. Distribute rewards without undue respect. Redistribute rewards without undue respect for rulers. Publish orders without undue regard for precedent. In other words, make your orders don't break. In other words, distribute rewards and don't respect for rule. Not in other words, whatever the ruler says about don't give the people money, keep send it up here. No, you distribute the rewards to your soldiers, and don't care if the boss is not happy with you. Publish orders without undue regard for precedent. Deal with the whole army as though it's a single man. Um, 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 Now this continues it up here. Apply them to their task without words of explanation. Confront them with advantage, but do not explain the danger. Show them the benefit, show them what's going to be there, but don't explain the danger. Don't let them calculate. Deal with them whole as single man. Apply them to their tasks. Don't necessarily explain everything to them in that sense. Don't without words of explanation. Just see the advantage and that they'll grab it. This is something about his idea of human nature, saying that if you give them the cost benefit, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll say, "Well, no, the benefit isn't worth the cost," right? That's why you don't want. And if you give them too much explanation, they'll do this comparison of value to cost. You don't want to do that. You want to put them in a situation, and you put them in there and do not explain the danger that and then they're in danger, and therefore they'll do what he says. If once they're in the situation where they don't have hope, they will all work together like that. That's the weird thing there. Throw them into perilous grounds, and they will survive. Plunge them into death ground, they will live. When a force has fallen in the danger, it can snatch victory from defeat. And this is very interesting. That when the soldiers are forces fallen in the danger, they could have been losing, but now all of a sudden, what happens? This situation that we talked about earlier about how what happens when they lose their hope and they're going to face death, and they want to live, but they will in order to live they must fight and be victorious. They will snatch victory from defeat. Success in war lies in scrutinizing the enemy intentions. Okay, the success, in other words, okay, now first ground, snatch from defeat. Yeah, he says in success in war lies in scrutinizing enemies' intentions and going with them. In other words, look at the tensions and use them. Use their intentions. Success in war lies in scrutinizing the enemy's intentions, is in going with them. Focus on the enemy, and from 100 miles, you can kill their general. This is success through cunning. In other words, focus on the enemy, and from 100 miles, you can kill their general. This is success through cunning. What do you mean by that? He means that you can know how they're behaving, you know how they're doing, so you can get the point where you can defeat him or destroy him, his ability to lead. On the day you decide to attack, close the passes, destroy the tallies, break off intercourse with envoys. Be firm in temple councils for your execution of your plans. On the day you attack, you close the passes, shut the passes that can come. Destroy the tallies, records, and things that break off the intercourse with the different envoys, and be firm in the council for the execution of your plan. You plan what you're going to do. You're going to do it. Be firm in it. Don't show doubt and don't show hesitation. If the enemy opens a door, rush in. Seize what he holds dear and secretly contrive an encounter. So therefore, if the second that the enemy gives you an opportunity to get in there, do it. It opens a door. Now, he can intentionally open door and then unintentionally open a door by the open door here. Could be areas he left undefended. Otherwise, you attack undefended areas. Maybe it's if you see everything's being defended here, don't attack him there. Attack him over where he's the least prepared. You attack the least, so what you can do, then you can move massively right in his thing, the heart of his country. Go for the things that he needs the most. Go for his source, the strategic sources of that state's power, the strategic sources of that state's ability to wage war. You go to those locations and you make it very difficult. He has to come towards you. In other words, you have to. In other words, and you secretly contrive an encounter. Disregard rules. Follow the enemy to fight the decisive battle. In other words, disregard rules. Follow the enemy. Don't play the rules of war. Look what your enemy's doing. Look at them, and you do to what? To fight the decisive battle, you have to look what they're doing and look for their mistakes. Look for their mistakes and things that you can get them to do what you want to do. That you create a situation where you pick the battlefield, in the battlefield is totally advantageous to you, and that when you attack him, you're the millstone and he is the egg. At first, be like a maiden. When the enemy opens a door, be swift as the hare. So be like a maiden. Look, before the enemy, think of maiden. Oh, you're innocent. You're weak. You're weak. You're innocent. You're not doing anything. You're not strong. You're not a threat. You're oh a little bit. So what happens? The enemy opens the door. You like a head rabbit. Rah! Swift as the hare. Your enemy will not understand you. You're expecting, oh, he's weak. We're going to come into him. We're going to be able to do something. He makes his move. You then rah! Right through that. And the enemy is like, what? What's going on here? Okay, this ends this chapter, this thing of the nine grounds. The nine grounds is very interesting. You get the grounds, but also you get two other things. You get this idea that not only the nine grounds are essential, but what does he say? That you need also to know what he says the flexible maneuver, hence the discussion of the snake, and then what the principles of human nature, the knowing of the nature of people. Not only what nature, not only of your leaders, your soldiers, your enemy, including their leaders and their soldiers, their general and their things, of generals, of leaders, those of what they can do, these things, of your the plans of the various lords in the region, so that you know what they are. Right, you have to know their nature and know facts about it. And then the invasion is what? Remember, the way of invasion is deep presentation brings cohesion, shallow. So remember that you add these different things about different grounds. It's the intersect between these three things. And the other things as well, that the variations of the non-ground, the advantages of flexible maneuver, and the principles of human nature. This is what the things that must be studied in order to be the successful leader and the warrior. And here we end our thing. So again, I'm sorry for the coughing and things. It's the air in here. It's kind of having a problem because there's construction that's over there and there's a lot of dust. And I suspect and my air filter is on, but it's not making a lot of noise. I to get if I put it on more, it'll be kind of noisy. And I did that once or twice, and my wife said, "Don't do that again." And she's very good on these kind of things. Um, so if you have any questions, please put it below. I will respond if I see them. I haven't seen any so far, so to other things yet so far. I mean, from other classes I have, and other things I got comments and I will reply. So I will be diligent on that. So put your comments there below. I will respond. If you like what I do, this video, you liked it, please like it, share it with a friend. If you came across this now and you're not following it, subscribe from this. Well, so that you get future messages. You can follow me on social media. The information is below. Again, we're using the John Milford translation. Again, there's different versions of it. Both by Penguin. It's by Penguin. The information again is below. So again, I hope you all have a nice day. Take care. Bye bye.